If people feel less safe, does the data matter? Community safety is emotional and it's complicated. But what's the perception? What's reality? How is policing evolving to continue supporting community safety? Let's talk about it. You're listening to the Real Ridge podcast, where we share the stories behind the headlines on topics that are shaping Maple Ridge. Today, we're having an honest conversation about community safety with Officer in Charge Adam Gander, from the numbers to what's happening on the ground. Welcome, Adam. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come and speak with us today. Why don't you just start off and give us the lowdown on who Adam Gander is?
I guess my story would start 25 years ago. And so that was the first day I came out of depot where we all go to our training and posted here to Maple Ridge. And so baby fresh-faced constable 25 years ago taking files here in Maple Ridge. And now it's really strange to me 25 years later now being the officer in charge.
And you haven't aged a day.
I think there's photographic proof that I have.
All right, so let's just get right into it. How has community safety changed in recent years on paper and on the ground?
Yeah, and when I talk about thinking back the 25 years from when I started here, the big change that I think we've seen is a lot of the social chronic calls for service. So a lot of mental health related calls. And that's a lot of our calls for service, and the amount of time our officers are spending is around what I call more social related calls. So mental health or drug addiction. And that's the big change I've noticed in my career.
Now, is that when we talk about mental health, talk about drug related issues, when you were that fresh-faced officer, first started on that journey, did you see a lot of that?
I'll be honest, no. I mean, it was still there, but I wouldn't say like every day we have multiple officers going to the hospital and taking people in under the Mental Health Act. That was not the case 25 years ago. And so we're seeing a lot more of that related. I keep thinking back, we had the individuals that were homeless in the community. We knew by name, we knew where they were from. It was the same people. And now we're seeing a lot more transition, I would say, a lot more people. So our officers that are on the ground are meeting new people all the time.
You mentioned the Mental Health Act and the hospital. And I know a couple of weeks ago, we were there for about 4 hours for Deb's mom. She had taken a fall and it was about 10 o'clock at night. We were there for 4 hours. And in the time that we were there for those 4 hours, I saw two of our officers in the room, in the hospital emergency room, and just hanging around. What is that all about?
Yeah, when our officers apprehend somebody under the Mental Health Act, we are not able to turn them over to hospital staff until we see an emergency room doctor. And so we can imagine the emergency room doctors are quite busy. And so they'll prioritize as they can. And I know they're working really hard to help us as well. But we really have to wait until that doctor is able to do their analysis and speak with the person we brought in. So if we're sitting for 2-3 hours, and then that's what we have to do. We can't leave.
And there's no special preference to serve the two police officers that are there, or that part of the normal triage?
No, I mean, we meet with hospital administrative staff monthly to talk about this, and they definitely want to make it a priority for us. They realize how busy we are, and having multiple officers waiting at the hospitals not really the best use of our officers, I would say. So they do try to priorities, but I get the fact of if a young child comes in with third-degree burns, that's going to trump us, and I understand that. So I know the hospital's doing the best they can, but for example, last year in 2025, on average, we were spending 160 hours a month waiting at the hospital.
160 hours, of which could be time spent back out on the street and doing the hard work.
And even when we talk 160 hours, then there's paperwork related to all that. So there's a bunch of documents we have to fill out. So even when we're cleared from the hospital, then our officers are sitting, typing it all up in the computer in the car about what's happened and what was the outcome. So the quicker we can move them and really, it's not fair to the patients that we're bringing in to be sitting there for hours if you're in a mental health crisis. So I think everybody understands is if we can expedite that, that would be great.
So do you see that the role of police today has really shifted from your typical traffic stops, crime prevention, patrolling the streets? How much of that whole mental health aspect has now taken over the role of the police officer?
Yeah, I would say in my career, a definite shift from that law enforcement element to more of a social crisis manager, I would say. Yeah, we are the default 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 to be the response for every kind of social, chronic, or mental health related type of call. So there's a percentage of our calls from family members, from people in the healthcare system calling us to be able to deal with somebody that needs to come into the hospital.
What I find interesting is somebody who wants to go into social care, They want to be a social worker or they want to be a mental health worker. They go through an education process, get a degree, they spend X amount of time in college or university. And yet we look at police officers. Talk about the training they get. Is it as complex as that?
No, I mean, there's always when our officers, they go to training for 6 months to learn a lot of the basics, driving, shooting, handcuffing, all that kind of technical skills that we need our police officers to do. But there has been a shift in the last years where they're starting to get more of that kind of conflict resolution training and dealing with people in crisis and being really trauma informed. So we still have to have the basics. We have to have our police officers have to do the basics, what I call policing. But there is more of that emphasis a little bit now on how do we help our officers deal with people in crisis and that kind of verbal judo and being able to talk through versus jump on somebody and handcuff them and the system's over. We know that doesn't work, right? So when people are in crisis, especially mental health, they need a caring person to help them.
Yeah. And when we talk about that, it must be frustrating for officers because they're seeing so much of it. And the extent of their training is probably not as, the type of education there. Where does, in your opinion, what are some of the things that we can do? I know the city does certain things, but this is much larger than a city issue. So let's talk about that for a moment as to how do we find solutions to some of those basic issues when it comes to mental health, when it comes to spending 160 hours a month in a hospital. What are some of the solutions? Have people been talking about solutions?
Yeah, I think everybody realizes that we can't police our way through this. And the police are one component of a much bigger network of resources that need to help individuals. So in this community, for example, we have repositioned a couple officers and we have a mental health unit now. So we have officers that's what they work on full time. That is their job. But they're also liaising with our community safety officers who are also on the street here in Maple Ridge. And they're talking about the same clients and how they can, have you seen Mr. X? We need to make sure that they're speaking to their mental health worker. So we're having that communication. We also are dealing with specific programs coming out of Fraser Health that work with the clients that need help. So they're liaising with our officer and they'll call our officers and say, can you come with us? We're going to go do a home check today. And it's more for the safety component. So a lot of that is where we're going. And then, like I said, we meet with the hospital monthly and specific clients, we're coming up with action plans, but it's not a police action plan. It's 3 or 4 different groups or 5 or 6 working on how can we get the best help we can and long-term for that individual.
I know when I did a ride along last year, we did a wellness check that didn't turn out so well, but that officer was now committed to the scene until they were able to be released. And then I was handed off to a different officer to do different things. And so, the whole evening, it was up until about 3 a.m, dealt with numerous calls that went from checking people out who shouldn't be where they're supposed to be. There was a fire in there. There were a couple of chases. It was actually quite interesting to see that the officers that I drove with, they were on their own. Their ability to grasp the situation for what it was. They were noticing things that I'm sitting in the front seat and I'm like, how did you get the guy's license plate? Like you're flying on a highway and they're catching these things. And that's something that is learned through depot. And so that's really impressive to see. But I want to jump into now, because we hear this a lot. Why does crime sometimes feel worse, even when the numbers don't show it? I know my office will get a list of the incidents for the whole month, and they seem to be trending downwards. And yet the feeling out there is different. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think this is just a general trend with social media in particular. What we're seeing now is people instantaneously able to report themselves to a vast audience. It's on a Facebook group and you can send a message right away and 500 neighbors could see that incident. And so people, when they keep seeing it, they keep thinking it's constant. I'll give you an example. If somebody came onto somebody's deck and stole their lawn chairs and they have it on video and they put it on their Facebook and 500 people in that community. But what they're not reporting is nothing happened for 21 days or whatever. But the one incident, people think that now it's a crime wave and it's over top. And it could just have been an isolated one incident. Maybe we arrested that person or, they moved on or whatever the case is. But it's not interesting to hear when things don't happen. Nobody's posting, hey, nothing happened in my house in the last 9 months. And I get why people do it. It's very easy to take pictures. Everybody's got CCTV and video in their house now and they're able to share. And that's what sells. I mean, we see it in the media too, right? What's the phrase, what bleeds, leads. And so when you watch global news at 6 o'clock, 6 or 7 stories around, a lot of them are police related. And when I watch, I even get depressed. I'm like, wow, what's going on? But they're not reporting all the other good stuff that's going on. And when I say for data, like people, for example, 2018 was our kind of high point in the last 10 years for crime here in Maple Ridge.
Right.
And when I tell people now, we're down over 40% from our high in 2018, people won't believe it. Break-in enters, like that's a one that everybody reports to us generally. If you get broken into your house, you're going to report it to the police. That's down 75% in the last 8 years from that high in 2018. And I can tell that to my officers and they won't even believe it. And what we've tried to do at our detachment is public dashboard. So you can Google Ridge Meadows RCMP dashboard and we update it monthly and it'll show you all the data. And we're trying to be as transparent as we can, but I can put out as much data as I am, but the next day somebody puts a social media post out and nobody's going to listen to me saying, property crime is down 40%.
Well, how do you speak to those that say something like, I'm not reporting it because nothing ever gets done. So why report it?
Well, what I say about that is policing is very data driven now. And so there's a lot of things where we're going to patrol and where we're going to go and when we're going to set up surveillance. And if the public's not reporting that to us, there's not much we can do because we have to go where we know we need to go. So if we know that there's a rash of catalytic theft in Albion neighborhood, well, our night shift team will be out there more and driving the data. So we always say we really encourage the public to report because that's where we're going to be able to look at trends and make sure our officers are in that area.
That's actually a great example because where I live, there was a string of catalytic converters that had been stolen. And about 2 weeks later, I had my residents coming up to me and saying, oh, be careful, they're taking things. And about 2 weeks later, you came out with an announcement. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a really recent example you're talking about. So again, neighbors were reporting that the catalytic converter thefts, we have crime analysts, civilian, who look at all the data and they send reports to our officers of what's going on in real time. And so in this case, what really broke this was a citizen noted something suspicious and took a picture and sent it to us. And we were able to action that very quickly. Our teams were already looking at it. And within, I think it was 48 hours, we had executed a search warrant on our residence. We were able to arrest somebody. Sure enough, catalytic converter theft, the actual catalytics were there. So that's what we want to do, get on top of it right away so we can get rid of the problem.
So it's pretty important that people continue to report whatever crime they're encountering, whether it's a theft, and they may just get a number, but that all gets put into a system. And that system, now you have AI and analytics.
That's correct.
That start to look for trends. And that makes your job a little bit more easier.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a big town.
500 kilometers of roads.
There's a lot of areas to patrol. I've probably driven every single one of them. But yeah, there's different areas. And we can't just listen to the noise. We also have to follow the data. So if the data is telling us to go there because we're getting those reports, that's where we're going to go. And we're going to try to solve that problem.
I think that's the exciting part of leasing, is being able to look at the data that's out there, being able to determine who the perpetrator might be, and then going after them. In today's world, we're constantly being fed the lines about jail, not bail type thing. And might be an unfair question, but let's talk about that because you hear about it a lot in the media, political pieces that are out there, jail, not bail, whatever the slogans are. But what are you seeing? And I know there's challenges with that, but let's talk about that for a minute.
It's a really complex question you're asking me.
I know it is.
I think one thing that maybe the public doesn't know is that the police in BC don't charge. So we're not the determinator if somebody gets charged for theft. We write a report to Crown Counsel, and Crown Counsel is ultimately the one that decides if somebody is charged or not. So our officers, before they can forward that report to Crown Counsel, there's a big package of disclosure that has to go along with that. So we might catch somebody at one of the big box stores here, theft, and we catch them 2 days in a row. Well, each time we have to put all the data together. And you can imagine that doesn't happen in the same day. And Crown Counsel is saying, we're not going to charge until we see all the evidence. So a lot of times, the person's arrested and we have to release them because we don't have all the information yet. So we give them a court date and then we maybe arrest them again. This is part of what people I think are concerned about is just the way the process is and how we're able to, if somebody shoplifts from a big box store, they're not going to be held in jail. We know that. But if they get repeatedly done, and that's when we're talking to Crown Counsel and say, this prolific offender is really, we've got a real issue with our business community, and we'll work with Crown Counsel and we'll see what we can do. But I could see that, I understand why people are frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, just with the example that you use, if somebody is shoplifting, there's kind of an understanding like, why isn't that person in jail? And that's a good question. Do we throw people in jail for shoplifting? Do we hold them for a certain amount of time? I mean, you've got the Charter of Rights that play a role here. You've got the Crown Attorney that plays a role here. This must be maddening for police to try to manage.
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, we talk about data and trying to really, we have limited resources. So we want to target the highest profile prolific offenders, the one that are daily basically shoplifting. And often it's to feed their addiction. Like it all starts to pile into the same issues together. And so that's where we're really trying to focus on the biggest offenders to try to really, if we can get them held, that's great. And so that's what we're really trying to focus on.
I know recently you did an operation with shoplifting. What were the results of that?
Yeah, we're going to be doing a media thing pretty quick. So generally our officers are working undercover. And so we're able to arrest people as they're walking out of the store, working with the loss prevention officers. I could say every day that our team was out, multiple arrests were made. I can give you one case, a particular person, we weren't there that day, but the store owner showed us video. And our officers, again, know the prolific offenders, knew exactly who that was. Well, sure enough, when they're undercover that day, the person came in and was stealing again. So we were able to arrest for both incidents now. So again, that is something we're going to tell Crown Council of. This wasn't one-off, somebody stealing a pack of, some meat or milk to feed their family. This is a repeat offender who's constantly targeting business. That's the ones that we're going to try to work with Crown Council on.
It's not easy being a police officer. So what kind of calls are police responding to most often to today?
Yeah, I think we touched on it, is that a lot of the mental health, social related types of calls. The other one that we get a lot of community calls is about road safety. Road safety, definitely, with speed or dangerous driving. And so that's what we've called our road safety target team. So they're looking at trying to target the most, again, prolific drivers, the ones that are speeding all the time or driving while prohibited. So trying to get, those are the ones that we're trying to look at. And the other part of the data is looking at where the major crashes are happening. So we've seen some really horrific crashes on the east side of Lougheed out at 270th. So our team is out there a lot, and they're not looking for people doing 5 kilometers and over. It's the ones that are doing 40 kilometers over, like the really dangerous drivers. That's what our team is really trying to focus on. And again, on the data side, what our team has is we've got some tech where we're able to put it into a neighborhood and it can tell us the time and the times of day when we see the most speeders. And it does that neighborhood have more speeders than another neighborhood. So we want to really kind of focus, as we say, have limited resources to make sure they're targeting the best places we can.
Yeah, it seems that in today's world, data is the driver of a lot of reaction out there. I know we talked about the mental health portion of it, but just so I get a sense here, are we talking 10%, 20%, 50%? I know it's hard because mental health can be so many things. It's an umbrella word today. You got folks that are unhoused. They've got some mental health challenges. But we also have people with mental health challenges that are housed. And do you have any insight as to more the unhoused? Are you seeing more people that are in homes, or they have jobs, they have everything? Are you responding to a lot of calls like that?
When you look at it, it's a wide variety. I think last year we attended about 1,700 calls. So that's about 5 a day, but they're all over the place. It could be a young teenager who's going through depression, and so they're self-harming. So they live in $1 million house, but the parents don't know what else to do. So we get the help and take her to the hospital. That's the kind of call. We could get another one of, I haven't heard from my brother for 3 days. I'm really worried about them. So we're going to the house to check on them. So it is the gamut. We look at the number of people that were taken to the hospital and individualized people. There's obviously some repeat people, but it's surprising to us how many on a wide variety from different areas of life.
And of course, when you bring them to the hospital, what happens afterwards, after you've released them to the hospital, is now up to the healthcare agency to figure out what's next.
That's right.
And you have no control over that. Because when you arrest somebody under the Mental Health Act, that lasts for what? That allows you to take them to the hospital? And then what?
If they certify them, what we call certify, then the hospital takes over, and that's when our officers leave. And even when I say we leave, and I've talked about our mental health unit, our mental health team is looking at where those files are coming in. Every day they're reviewing who's being brought in, and maybe it's clients they've already dealt with or they've heard about. So if the person does get released from the hospital, our mental health corporal might be talking to the ACT team to talk about, should we be doing some home checks? And so there is that kind of, it's not a stop, then we're totally done. There's the opportunity to follow up for the ones that need help as well.
You know, we've talked about some of the challenges with not being able to do things and things that are out of your control. But let's talk a moment about things that have been in your control. I know a couple of years ago, the city got some funding from the federal government for the Guns and Gangs program, and we got a couple of $1 million for it. What did you do with that money?
Yeah, that was a great opportunity to kind of look at how can we be more proactive? How do we to really help? Where are the gaps in the community that we as the police can help? So one of the areas under that is we really noticed it's the youth. We want to prevent people getting into that life of crime or getting involved in gangs or access to firearms. So we ended up creating the first team, which is a family youth resource team. And what that really allowed us to do was hire a youth outreach worker and a clinical counselor to work right in the detachment. So right with our youth officers. So kind of a triangle, wraparound kind of. So when calls were coming in, it wasn't just the police now referring it to somebody else, or we're able to deal with it in the first instance and meet with the family. When they're really having that crisis on a Saturday night, our team can swoop in and help them out. So it's been really successful. And we've seen what we really want is the police officers, when we can, being out on the street, doing patrol, and the other side of it is can we reduce those calls for service? So a young person who's acting out and call after call and the parents are frustrated. And if we get intervention, can we bring that under control when we don't hear from them for 2 months? And so that's where when we're seeing is that officer saving time is have officers on the road, but that all support side, make sure that that's there for.
So it's been a successful program.
Absolutely.
But it's coming to an end.
Like many things, the funding runs out. And, we've really looked at what we can do because we really see value in that program of, again, we touched on at the beginning, can't law enforcement your way out of this. It cannot be a police problem. So thinking like this is an innovative program that we've had other communities call us about because it's so different. Having outreach workers right in with police officers is really, I think, the way we need to go.
Yeah, and I know that we've been advocating to get more funding for that, and both with the province and the federal government, because the results have been so dramatically good that if you're keeping young folks off the streets, if you're catching them before they have an opportunity to do something else, and you're helping them through that moment, through the various programs, that benefits everybody. We just got to figure out now, okay, well, where do we get the funding for that next stage? So that's something that we are advocating for. Okay, so now let's shift a little bit and, because people understand that the city of Maple Ridge hires the RCMP to be the police force. So how does that work? Does the mayor get to tell you what to do?
No. But I think the way I would answer that is I think why we've been so successful is that constant sharing of information from the public and from yourself. You're the one getting a lot of the concerns in the community. And I think there's been that really open communication to make sure that we're hearing what you're hearing. Our officers are on the ground, are hearing things, and we're able to send that back also up to the city and say, hey, we've really noticed maybe the lighting is really dark in one alley and our officers are out there and they've noticed some crime. That's where we're able to come back to see if it's engineering or works and say, is there a chance we can get a street light in there? Real basic kind of thing. So yes, information comes from you, but I think we're also sharing information back the other way.
So what else do we do to collaborate with the RCMP and then city supports and services?
No, and I think kind of the theme that we've been talking about is that it cannot be the police alone. And so the fact that the city, and I sit on the director's table, so I'm there with engineering and the bylaws director, and so we're able to share information, but also learn what the priorities are. So on the ground, it could be our community safety officers work on foot patrol with our crew team, our crime team. It could be, again, if we see garbage in an area, call the city on the sanitation side. Can you guys come in here? And, we've really noticed a problem. So it's that kind of back and forth and making sure that everybody's doing the most efficient work they can. And it's not just focused on one area.
I find that interesting because it's part of our one city philosophy where we're all working collaboratively together. And I really like to hear that when you see garbage or lighting, that gets passed on to the right department and we're able to action that. But we also provide civilian supports inside the detachment. Let's talk about that for a moment.
I mean, we would never be able to do what we do with all the other behind the scenes. It's kind of the secret part of policing. And because it's just so much other things. I touched earlier on the crime analyst. So that's the civilians. That team is working to figure out where our police officers should go and really drive that. Court liaison team, making sure everything that has to go to Crown is done in the proper format. Just everything. Our officer is out on a shift. There's an accident. Their car needs fixed. Well, we have a fleet manager who's able to, so it's not a police officer who's trying to get quotes for a fender bender, right? So really all that other behind the scenes part of it. I mean, and I'd be remiss not to talk about like victim services. So we have civilian staff that are coming. When we go to the most traumatic scene, a sudden death of somebody's elderly father, The officers can do what they can do, but there's that other supports where we need victim services to come. So at 2:00 in the morning, we're able to ask them to come out and be with that family in probably the most traumatic moment of their life. So the officers really rely on all the civilian side to really help us.
That must go a long way to helping officers manage their own mental health challenges because it's not easy to see what they come to see every shift that they're working. And there must be some really horrible things that they see. So, how do officers deal with their own mental health?
Yeah, and we talk about my career in the 25 years. That is a really big change now that young officers from the beginning are comfortable to go see a psychologist and talk about, some issues or, take time if they need to go, get some time off. That wasn't really discussed when I first started. You went to a really horrific scene. You kind of suck it up, buttercup, like that's part of the job. Now we're doing check-ins. We have an officer who looks after our officer health just to check in with the officers, like, you went to a pretty horrific sudden death last night. Let's talk about how that was. And not every call that our officers is traumatic, but we want them to check in on themselves and get help if they need it. I know your friend Loki, our dog that's full-time in our office, and Loki's been amazing. Like when people have had a really tough shift or, really traumatic, like go pet the dog and he's running around and he wants to tug the toy. Like it's been really impactful to have him around too.
Sometimes the little things that make a huge difference. And so have you seen a difference with your members' mental health? Have you seen more people tapping into those types of supports? And
I mean, we had a young officer and she was just away from her trainer. So when they come out of depot, then they have 6 months with their trainer and she was riding by herself and went to a fatal car accident, being first at scene. And you're really young and you're not prepared for that. And so really trying to make sure that the supports are there for her and making sure it's okay for her to talk about it. Big change in the last 10, 15 years is to really get in front of that and discuss that.
it's hard for myself or anybody out there to really envision those types of scenarios. And, we're so wrapped up in our own little worlds and we have things that trigger us. But when you're dealing with first responders, and really you are first responders, so you don't know what to expect when you get there. But I'm glad to hear that mental health supports in the department, big piece of that, and that they're working towards that. So that's really exciting to hear. Okay, so I know, like the city, people will go on social media, they'll put a picture of something that's broken, and you're trying to figure out, well, where is this thing that's broken? I don't know where it is. I can't fix it. So let's talk about the role that residents can play beyond just calling 911, right? And saying, I got a problem, 911, let's go. What else can they do?
Yeah, I think immediately comes to mind is just reminding people to target harden themselves. I'm shocked at how many calls I see where somebody's car got broken into and the car was left unlocked and they left their laptop in the back seat. And I shake my head and just little things like that. And I'm not blaming, but just really thinking about, leaving valuables in cars and just making sure that you're not leaving the garage door clicker in your car and somebody could break in, steal that, just really thinking about all that kind of stuff. So target hardening, I think, is really important. Again, the greatest thing for me is people to volunteer. Come with us and volunteer and doing Citizens on Patrol, which is our cars are driving out at night and checking the parks and calling the police if there's something going on. So volunteering is also a great thing. I think a little thing that people can do is we're seeing some uptick in senior fraud. And so speaking with your parent or elderly about, hey, here's some of the things that you need to realize on that fraud. You don't want to lose your life savings by somebody, trying to trick you out of your money. So really having discussions and really looking after each other, I think would be great. But I don't want to say people shouldn't have to call us. I think absolutely, if you can call that, talked about the catalytic converter. That's somebody who's looking out their window, here's something, taking a picture and calling us. Like, don't hesitate to call us about things that are kind of in action. And that's what we're really there for.
That, you mentioned scams. It's gotten very complicated. 20 years ago, it was happening then, but it wasn't as sophisticated as it is today, where AI playing a role in that. And what are you seeing out there with the sophistication of the scams that are out there?
Yeah. I think that previously people let their guard down because they think that somebody's going to phone them, they're going to have an accent, or they're professionals now. They're actors. They will keep you on the phone for 2 hours to talk about things. AI, they'll spoof the number. So the number that comes up on your call display says your bank comes up as the number, and they've just spoofed that. So people let their guard down and they're like, I didn't think I was going to be scammed. I talked to them for an hour and a half. They are actors. Like, this is their job. So And we're really trying to get out there more and talking to the community about what we're seeing and making sure that people are safe and, not handing over their PIN numbers. Like the banks will never ask for your PIN number over the phone. And we tell people is just, you know what? It's okay. You're allowed to hang up. There's no urgency. Hang up and walk down to the bank or look up the bank on Google and phone them. They're not going to ask you for your PIN number. So just basic tips like that, we're really trying to get out there.
Yeah, I think when, they're the obvious, hey, you've won, here's your prize. It's a all expense paid trip to Disneyland, and you're all excited and people go, yeah, I actually won something. And then they go, we just need your information. And maybe people don't realize what is actually going on behind the scenes. So if I give my name, my phone number, my address, what do they do with it?
Well, that's what they're trying to get. They'll get that information and then they'll just keep getting, if you're going to give some, they're going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And we've had cases where they'll say, well, we're going to have somebody from the bank come by your house and pick up your cards. And so stay on the phone, they're going to come. And they're driving to these people's houses, nicely dressed. And they'll give them a code. They'll say, the code is 962. Is that what the person on the phone told you? Yes, it is. They can't believe that they would go through that much work to do this. And like I say, this is their job. This is professional. So yeah, it might just start with a name and then it just keeps transitioning to more and more information.
And of course, that also can lead to identity fraud, where they steal your information and now they're able to put together a profile on you and issue themselves a new birth certificate, a new driver's license. And the next thing you know, they're you.
Luckily, we haven't seen too many of those. A lot of them are just looking for that cash and trying to drain your account or get your credit card and run up to London Drugs and buy a bunch of computers as fast as they can because they know you're going to report at some point.
Or the gift cards. I've seen quite a few folks that got caught up in gift cards. Look, this is CRA. We're going to come by and throw you in jail if you don't pay this. So go to London Drugs, as you said, get the gift cards and then give them to us. It's unfortunate, but the level of sophistication that has changed. 20 years ago, you would get the emails. And I always wondered why some of the emails were such bad language and bad grammar until I realized that they're weeding out people who are going, well, this is a scam because it's bad language. But yet the ones that do respond are now showing themselves as the vulnerable ones. And so I like what you said about target hard. I do like the cops on patrol. That's a great volunteer opportunity. I know we've also been doing the Be Downtown initiatives. How's that working?
Yeah, I think when we talk to businesses and citizens, they want to see police officers in person. They want to see them on the ground, walking around, talking. It's great that they see a car, but they want that interaction. So that's where we really tried to focus when we talk about Be Downtown, is set up that tent and just invite the community to come. And if it's us or it's fire or we have volunteers there, just all together so we can interact with the community on a kind of a ground level. And that's been really successful and we're getting a lot of good feedback from that.
And are you seeing the folks that do come to the tents? How is their understanding of who to call, when to call, what services are available? Is there a general knowledge of that, or is that still a gap?
No, I think there's always going to be a gap because certain incidents, you're not sure. Is that a police matter? Is that a bylaws matter? And so a lot of times we'll get called as the first, but we'll be able to refer that to where it needs to be. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to downplay. If it is an emergency and you need police right away, that's a 911 call. And we'll make sure that we're getting our officers there. If you don't think it's an emergency, but you still need police, there is a non-emergency number for us. The third way you can report to us, we actually have an online reporting. So if it's something that's graffiti on the back of your property, you don't know any suspects, you can just report that online. What I would also refer people to, if it doesn't fall under the police umbrella, is just check with mapleridge.ca. There's a /report, and it gives you other services within Maple Ridge that can help. If it's the community safety officers or if it's any kind of thing that they think that's not police, but somebody needs to come help us with. But having a discussion with somebody about, hey, I've noticed a lot of this around in my neighborhood. Okay, here's the best number to call. So being able to share that information for citizens has been really helpful.
And I know that we've also, over the last couple of years, have been doing programs like Project Dovetail and numerous ones where you are out in the community. You've shown that when police are walking feet in the downtown core, you've managed to cut shoplifting in half. What other initiatives can people expect to see?
Yeah, we were really excited and our officers were excited. We bought some e-bikes last year. Just amazing how quick they're able to respond, how down alleys and the amount of kilometers they're able to get in a day. Like, again, we just talk about technology changes and like that e-bike, that's going to be a game changer. So we're going to see more of that. As I say, the crew team, this last year, 2025, is when we dedicated them full time. So we were doing other projects and we were trying to do it as we could, but now we want the same officers talking to the same businesses. So when they tell them, hey, I saw Mr. X behind the dumpster, the same officers back the next day is like, are they there again? And so we don't have to break it up. So it's the officers have really good intelligence of what's going on, and the business owners know what our officers are doing. So we want to do more of that, is that kind of regular, you see the same people down, and maybe they whip by on the e-bike, but yeah, just being around.
So, targeted question here. Do you need more officers?
I doubt there's a police chief in Canada that's going to say no, or we got too many. There's just so many opportunities that we could do more of that, where we talk about the first team and having the wraparounds, being back in our schools and making sure we're there, being on the ground. Like, that's where we need more officers related to that, and just being really targeted of how we want to do that.
We're coming down to the end of our time together. So I'll leave you with one more question. From all your years of experience, what's the one thing you wish people understood better about policing today?
I would say just how busy our officers are. They're going call to call to call to call. And when they're not at a call, you might see a couple cars in front of the police station. Well, they're not in there playing backgammon. They're in there now writing reports and doing follow-up with complainants and victims. And just the administrative side of policing is just, it's really cumbersome. So just rest assured, if our officers are at Tim Hortons, that's not where they're spending 8 hours of their 12-hour shift. Like, they may not have gotten any kind of break on a 12-hour shift, and they're running in there for 10 minutes to be able to get something at 3 a.m. just because they're so busy. And I think people forget that it's a busy career they picked.
And in one final question. So you've been officer in charge now for a year and a half?
Yeah, almost. Yep.
Almost a year and a half, because now you're looking at it from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
What are your final thoughts on that? Is this more than you thought it would be? Did you bite off too much? Are you...
You know what's been great is that I live in this community. We've raised our kids here. And there's so many of our officers in this detachment who live here. And this is a vested interest. And so it makes me really proud when I think of how hard they're working, because there's so much ownership. This is their community too. And so I would never doubt the fact that I've done this, because it's so amazing to see the work that our officers are doing out there. And I'm just super proud of them. So yeah, I'll do it again.
Well, we hope so. They put a lot of faith in you. It was an easy choice when the time came and Wendy was transferred out to help out in Surrey. It was an easy choice because Wendy had done such a great job, Wendy Mehat, of doing that succession planning. And I know that you're doing the same thing, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to get pulled out and transferred. So, those are the things that we look to you to make sure that, regardless of who is there in charge or your 2IC, is that we're always preparing for the future. Listen, thank you, Adam, for taking the time today out of your busy day and sharing with us some of your thoughts on policing in Maple Ridge. And we look forward to figuring out how we can get you more resources to get the job done.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate your time, and yeah, good questions.
Perfect. Thank you.